Would you kill baby Hitler? It's a fun question that Stephen King does ask, and everyone has had that topic show up in a conversation at one point, right? Or is that just guys that ask if they would kill baby Hitler? Anyway, that's essentially what the question that Stephen King poses in The Dead Zone, and it's a pretty fun one in terms of, trying to sacrifice yourself for the greater good, or saying, nah fam, I want to live my days out. While many books on the market nowadays deal with extraordinary characters dealing with extraordinary events, Stephen King does the opposite in some sense. He puts ordinary people like you or me in some crazy ass situations and writes about how they would deal with it. If that sounds something that would interest you, then The Dead Zone is a great book to pick up and read. In my opinion, The Dead Zone is an essential read for anyone serious reading Stephen King, because it's the first novel that introduces us to Castle Rock, Stephen King's fictional town in Maine. Now, there are several novels that deal with Castle Rock, and it's important to read them in order. Because if you read Cujo before you read The Dead Zone, on the first page of Cujo, you're going to get spoiled on an important plot line in the story. So read this, then Cujo. But yeah, anyone who's serious reading Stephen King should definitely pick up this book, because Castle Rock shows up many other times, either in novels or even novellas and short stories. If you like love stories, then The Dead Zone actually is very good at that. One of my favorite parts of this book was a love relationship having to deal with extraordinary circumstances. Essentially, the main character goes into a coma. That's no spoiler, it's literally on the back of the book. And he leaves his girlfriend for 5 years. What is his girlfriend supposed to do? Be loyal? Expect him to be, to come out of this coma because many people think he's just a vegetable? It's a really interesting scenario that Stephen King writes about. And if this intrigues you, then give this book a try. It's very believable. If you're someone who likes world building in the sense of there are multiple characters around the world or around America that will eventually interact with one another, then Dead Zone is great. Stephen King, I think, does a good job at moving pawns around the chessboard to make them interact, to create a cohesive story. While The Dead Zone, in my opinion, was not my favorite story to read, he still does a good job by many to really get you to wonder how all these pieces move together. And yeah, if that's something you like, then Dead Zone is worth a shot. If you like paranormal themes, people with psychic abilities, ESP, that sort of stuff, then you're gonna love this book. Actually, you're gonna love this book. It's not my favorite theme to explore and read about, but I know people who would definitely enjoy this book because that's the sort of stuff they really like reading. And the main character does not shy away from using it throughout the book. One of the eeriest and creepiest reasons to read The Dead Zone is how similar one of the antagonists in this book follows the trajectory of Donald Trump in some sense. And I'm not trying to make a bold claim or anything. This is genuinely something that the Stephen King Reddit really has discussed. And it's how this character is an unlikely political candidate, but somehow moves up the ranks, and the people he employs are different than what you would expect. I feel as though this story somehow became real life in some sense, with Donald Trump just being a very different type of politician that we've seen in the past. A classic reason to read Stephen King's books is for his character development. Taking a coma patient and dealing with his side effects afterwards and his recovery is very believable. and he really makes the main character undergo some trials and tribulations that one would expect coma patients to deal with. Some characters in this book triumph under certain circumstances, while others degrade and go hysteric. It's fun to see how there's a different range of emotions throughout this book for several different characters, and this book does a good job for character development. So if you like character development like Ian Jabelli, give it a try. Now, I have no idea how deep of a cut this is, but if you know Washington Irving, the creator, the writer of The Sleepy Hollow, Legend of the Sleepy Hollow, then you also might be aware that he's written Rip Van Winkle. Now, there's a Rip Van Winkle reference in this book, and I'm 100% for it, all right? And if you know the premise of Rip Van Winkle and you liked it, then you should read The Dead Zone. It's very similar. And man, props to my boy Stephen King for giving a Washington Irving reference. Yeah, Rip Van Winkle. Wasn't expecting a reference of that in this book, and I was really happy to see that. So, admittedly, this is not my favorite story that I've read from Stephen King. I gave it, I think, a 4 on 10. But for the people who do end up reading this book, the ending is good. Like, objectively, I think the ending is really good. Again, I didn't vibe with the whole story, but I can say, confidently that you're not gonna be wondering about, again, like there's no loose endings in the story, I believe. I think it's very well thought out, very, it's tight. He closed it off well. That's what I'm saying. Jesus Christ, fuck, speak. He closes off the story well. It pulls at your heartstrings if you end up getting super invested with the main character and people adjacent to him. And a lot of people enjoy this book a lot. If you know Dave Musson, this is his favorite book of all time from Stephen King. So if you really like his content, and maybe you already know you've read it, but anyway, if you like his content and you haven't seen his whole spiel about this book, then either give it a listen or read this book, because he's like the Stephen King guy as well. So yeah, a lot of people like this story. The ending is fantastic, I think, for people who really enjoy the book, and you're not going to be disappointed. So yeah. So let me know if I've done a mediocre job at convincing you to read The Dead Zone if you haven't already. As someone who has, started his Stephen King adventures, this book was, I had mixed feelings about it, but some parts of the book were fantastic. I really enjoyed it. It was just, some other aspects I was not a big fan of. But that's just personal taste and not necessarily due to the style that Stephen King implements in the book. So anyway, if you like the book, let me know. And if you want to see more of this type of content, reviews, and reasons to read more Stephen King's books, please give me a like and a subscribe. It would mean a lot. So yeah, Stephen King forever.